They thought it was over. The Great Galactic Council had voted. Humanity was banned from the stars. Laughter filled the chamber as they celebrated their victory. But then the screens came alive. A single transmission from Earth began to play, and the laughter died. The Trial of Earth. The Galactic Assembly Hall stretched across 5 kilometers of polished crystalline floors that seemed to pulse with soft blue light. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the center of the speaking platform, a small circular stage that felt impossibly tiny beneath the rising tiers of seats that spiraled upward like the inside of a massive shell. Above her, the domed ceiling displayed a living map of the galaxy, with countless stars twinkling in their actual positions, updated in real time by sensors scattered across known space. Sarah wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a simple navy blue suit with silver trim that looked painfully plain compared to the exotic appearances of the delegates surrounding her. Some wore garments that shifted between solid and liquid states. Others existed as pure energy contained in floating spheres. A few had forms so alien that Sarah's mind struggled to process what her eyes were seeing. 800 species filled the assembly hall. 800 civilizations that had been exploring the stars for thousands or even millions of years. And every single one of them was staring at Sarah with expressions that ranged from contempt to amused curiosity. Not one friendly face existed in that vast crowd. Not one ally stood ready to defend humanity's cause. Behind Sarah, a holographic projection displayed Earth rotating slowly in space. The blue oceans and green continents looked fragile and small, a reminder that humanity came from just one world, while many of the species here controlled hundreds of planets across dozens of star systems. Executor Zin raised 3 of his 7 arms to signal for silence. The ancient Crithian had skin like polished obsidian, and eyes that glowed with an inner fire that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. His species had been traveling between stars when humans were still learning to make fire and hunting with stone-tipped spears. "We gather today to address the human problem," Executor Zin announced, his voice resonating through the chamber in a way that needed no translation technology. "This young species has been expanding beyond their home system for barely 300 cycles. In that short time, they have established colonies on 19 worlds, many of which were already cataloged by elder species for future development. They have ignored established boundaries. They have harvested resources from systems under protective observation. They have demonstrated a pattern of reckless behavior that threatens the careful balance we have maintained for millennia." A ripple of agreement moved through the assembly. Sarah kept her expression neutral, though her hands were clasped tightly behind her back. She had been warned that this would be difficult, but the reality was worse than she had imagined. A delegate named Counselor Vrek spoke next, his form a shifting mass of crystalline structures that chimed softly as he moved. "The humans are children playing with tools they do not understand. Their fastest ships barely reach a fraction of light speed. Their computers still rely on primitive silicon substrates. They have yet to master even basic quantum entanglement for communication. How can such a backward species claim the right to expand alongside civilizations that have perfected technologies beyond their comprehension?" Laughter echoed through the chamber, though it came in forms Sarah had never heard before. Some species clicked and whistled. Others released clouds of colored gas. A few vibrated at frequencies that made Sarah's teeth ache. But the message was clear in every language. They thought humanity was a joke. Another voice rose from the crowd belonging to Ambassador Thel of the Zorvathian Collective. "Let us not forget their environmental record. These humans poisoned their own atmosphere during their industrial age. They drove thousands of species to extinction on their home world. They depleted natural resources with no thought for sustainability. They nearly triggered a runaway greenhouse effect that would have made their planet uninhabitable. Is this the behavior of a species we should trust with access to pristine worlds?" Sarah felt heat rising in her cheeks but forced herself to remain calm. Everything they were saying was true, or at least based on truth. Humanity's history was filled with mistakes and atrocities, but it was also filled with lessons learned and changes made, if they would only listen. "Furthermore," continued a delegate whose name Sarah didn't catch, "they are violent by nature. Their entire history is a catalog of warfare. Humans have been fighting each other for territory, resources, and ideology since they first organized into tribes. They developed weapons capable of destroying all life on their planet, and came dangerously close to using them. What happens when such an aggressive species gains access to the greater galaxy? We have all worked hard to maintain peace among our civilizations. Humans could destabilize everything. The noise level rose as more delegates joined in, each adding their voice to the calls for restriction. Sarah heard the same themes repeated over and over. Humans were too young, too primitive, too dangerous, too reckless. They should be contained in their home system where they couldn't cause problems for more advanced species. Executor Zinn allowed the debate to continue for several minutes before raising his arms again. The chamber gradually fell silent, though Sarah could still feel the hostility radiating from every direction. Ambassador Chen, Executor Zinn said, fixing his glowing eyes on her, you have heard the concerns raised by this assembly. The evidence against your species is substantial. Your technological level is insufficient. Your history suggests poor judgment and violent tendencies. Your environmental record demonstrates a lack of wisdom. Given these facts, this council is prepared to vote on a resolution that would restrict humanity to your sol system indefinitely. You will be permitted to maintain your existing colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter and Saturn, but no further expansion will be allowed until such time as you can demonstrate genuine advancement and maturity as a civilization. Sarah took a slow breath. This was the moment. Everything depended on what happened next. Honored Executor, distinguished delegates, Sarah said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber despite her lack of any exotic vocal abilities. I understand your concerns. I will not stand here and claim that humanity is perfect or that we have not made terrible mistakes. Everything you have said about our history is accurate. We did poison our atmosphere. We did drive species to extinction. We did develop horrifying weapons and nearly destroyed ourselves. Some delegates seemed surprised that she was agreeing with them. Others looked satisfied as if she was confirming their judgment. But I would ask this assembly for one courtesy before you vote, Sarah continued. I would like permission to show you something. A short video, less than 15 minutes long. It addresses the questions that have been raised here today, better than any speech I could give. It shows you who humanity really is, not just our failures but our potential. Executor Zinn consulted with several senior members through silent communication methods Sarah couldn't perceive. After a long moment, he turned back to her. This is irregular, Ambassador Chen. We do not typically allow multimedia presentations during restriction hearings. I understand, Executor, Sarah replied, but I believe this video will answer the fundamental question before this assembly. Not whether humans are perfect, but whether we deserve the chance to prove ourselves. If after watching it you still wish to restrict us, I will accept that judgment without protest or appeal. Earth will live with whatever decision you make. The offer seemed to intrigue several delegates. Executor Zinn's eyes pulsed with brighter light as he considered. Very well, he finally said. You may present your evidence. But I warn you, Ambassador, if this is merely propaganda or an attempt at emotional manipulation, it will only strengthen the case against your species. Understood completely, Executor, Sarah said. She reached into her jacket and withdrew a small data crystal. May I upload the file to your central display system? A technician verified that the file contained only video data with no malicious code. After a tense moment, they signaled approval. Sarah uploaded the file and stepped back from the center of the platform, moving into the shadows at its edge. The hologram of Earth faded away, replaced by darkness. The chamber's lights began to dim. 800 species waited in the growing darkness to see what this primitive human could possibly show them that would matter. What could be important enough to stake humanity's entire future on a single video? Sarah's heart pounded as the first images began to appear in the holographic display. She had done everything she could. The rest was up to the video, and whether these ancient civilizations could see past their prejudices to understand what made humanity special. The presentation began, and in that moment, everything changed. The revelation. The holographic display flickered to life with images that seemed unremarkable at first. Earth appeared again, but not the peaceful blue marble from space. Instead, the video showed the planet's harshest environments in brutal detail. The crushing darkness of ocean trenches where pressure would flatten most life forms instantly. Volcanic regions where the ground itself burned hot enough to melt metal. Arctic wastelands where temperatures dropped so low that exposed flesh would freeze solid in seconds. Deserts where nothing should survive, yet life persisted anyway. Sarah watched from the shadows as the alien delegates leaned forward slightly. They had expected propaganda or military displays. This was something different. A human voice began narrating, calm and matter-of-fact. The translation devices converted it instantly into 800 languages. Earth was not kind to humanity. Our planet tested us with every extreme condition imaginable. We had no natural armor like the Krathians, no ability to photosynthesize energy like the Zorvathians, no telepathic coordination like the Vel Collective. What we had was the ability to adapt. The images shifted to show early humans, not the primitive stereotypes the delegates expected, but people solving problems, building shelters from ice in frozen wastelands, creating underground homes in desert cliffs, developing boats to cross vast oceans. Each solution was simple but effective, born from necessity and imagination. We learned to survive everywhere, the narrator continued, not because we were strong, but because we refused to accept that any environment was impossible. If a place could kill us, we studied it until we understood how to live there anyway. The video accelerated through human history, not focusing on wars or destruction this time, but on adaptation. Humans developing agriculture in regions where nothing should grow, creating clothing and tools suited for every climate, building cities in swamps, on mountainsides, in valleys prone to earthquakes. Every challenge met with innovation. Counselor Vrex shifted in his seat, his crystalline form chiming softly. Several other delegates exchanged glances through whatever communication methods their species used. The footage jumped forward to humanity's space age. But instead of showing primitive rockets and failed launches, it focused on something else entirely. The first Mars colony struggling with equipment failures and supply shortages. The video showed colonists improvising solutions with limited resources, repairing critical systems with materials never intended for that purpose, growing food in soil that shouldn't support Earth plants. You said our technology is primitive, the narrator stated without emotion. You are correct. But primitive technology has one advantage that advanced technology often loses. It can be fixed with whatever materials are available. It can be modified by people who understand principles rather than just pushing buttons. It can adapt. The display showed Mars colonists thriving despite equipment that elder species would consider dangerously inadequate. Gardens growing in modified Martian soil. Water extraction systems cobbled together from mining equipment. Habitats expanded using local materials and human ingenuity. Then came footage from Europa, one of Jupiter's frozen moons. Humans had established a research station beneath kilometers of ice, in an ocean that should have been completely hostile to Earth life. The video showed scientists not just surviving but discovering ways to process local minerals, generate power from tidal forces, and even cultivate modified algae that could exist in Europa's extreme conditions. We did not wait for perfect technology, the narrator explained. We went with what we had and made it work. Because that is what humans do. We adapt faster than our technology advances. Ambassador Thel of the Zorvathian Collective spoke up, his voice carrying an edge of concern rather than mockery now. This is impressive survival capability, but it does not address the concerns about human aggression and poor judgment. The video seemed to anticipate this objection. The images shifted to show a crisis that had occurred 5 years earlier, though most of the Galactic Assembly had never heard about it. A plague had struck a Valorian colony world, killing thousands before the Valorians understood what was happening. Their advanced medical technology, designed for their own biology, was useless against this particular pathogen. The Valorian Directorate called for aid, the narrator said. 17 species offered sympathy, but explained that developing treatments for alien biology would take years of research. Humans arrived within 3 weeks. The footage showed human medical teams working frantically in temporary facilities on the Valorian world, not using advanced alien equipment, but applying human medical principles, adapting Earth techniques to alien biology, testing treatments with a speed that seemed reckless but was actually carefully calculated risk-taking. We saved 4,000 Valorians, the narrator continued, not because our medical technology was superior, but because humans have extensive experience with rapidly mutating diseases. We learned to adapt to threats that evolve faster than our treatments. We learned to think creatively when standard solutions fail. Sarah noticed that many delegates were no longer dismissive. They were paying attention with genuine interest now. Some were accessing their own databases, probably verifying the Valorian incident. The video showed more examples. a human engineering team that solved a critical power grid failure on a Crithian industrial world, when local experts were stumped, using principles of energy distribution that were ancient by galactic standards, but applied in ways that had never been considered. Human agronomists who helped a struggling colony world increase food production by 300% using crop rotation techniques and soil management. That seemed primitive but worked perfectly. You asked what humanity offers to the galactic community, the narrator said. We offer the ability to solve problems that advanced technology cannot fix. We offer perspectives that species with millions of years of history have forgotten. We offer adaptation speed that makes us valuable in crisis situations. The mood in the chamber had shifted dramatically. The laughter was gone. The contempt had faded. Now there was something else in the air. Calculation, consideration, perhaps even a hint of concern. The video's tone changed as new footage appeared. This showed humanity's research facilities, but not weapons development. Instead, it displayed something more unsettling for the assembled aliens. Laboratories where human scientists were studying alien technology that had been shared through diplomatic exchanges. The video showed detailed analyses of Crethian propulsion systems, Zorvathian energy generation, Felorian medical devices. Every species that opened diplomatic relations with Earth shared their technology as gestures of goodwill, the narrator explained. We accepted those gifts with gratitude, and then we studied them. Not just how they work, but why they work. Not just how to use them, but how to build them. The display showed schematics and prototypes, human-built versions of alien technology. Not perfect copies, but functional adaptations using Earth materials and human engineering principles. More disturbing for the watching delegates, the video showed improvements, human modifications that made some designs more efficient or more adaptable to different conditions. Executor Zinn leaned forward in his seat. His glowing eyes had brightened considerably. The Vel Collective shared their quantum communication technology with Earth 8 years ago, the narrator continued. It took your species 47,000 years to develop that technology. Humans reverse-engineered it and built working prototypes within 18 months. The Crithian Empire shared their plasma shield technology. Your species required 12,000 years of research to perfect it. Humans created a functioning version in 3 years. Silence filled the chamber now. Heavy, uncomfortable silence. What the video was revealing was both impressive and deeply troubling. For species that had assumed humanity would take millennia to reach their technological level. We are not showing you this to boast, the narrator said, and for the first time there was emotion in that voice, something like urgency. We are showing you this because you need to understand what you are deciding today. If you choose to restrict humanity to our home system, you will be creating exactly the scenario you fear most. The video showed projections now, computer models and probability assessments, data that demonstrated what would happen if humanity was contained. Resources would be focused entirely on breaking that containment. Every brilliant human mind would be directed toward advancing technology rapidly enough to challenge the species keeping them caged. Every ounce of human determination would fuel resentment and desperate innovation. Cornered humans are dangerous humans, the narrator stated flatly. Contained humans are focused humans. If you cage us, every advancement we make will be aimed at escape. Every technology we develop will be evaluated for its potential to break your restrictions. You will transform us from a species that wants to cooperate into a species that sees you as obstacles to be overcome. The display shifted to show a different projection. This one showed humanity integrated into galactic civilization. Human colony worlds spreading gradually through unclaimed systems. Human problem solvers working alongside alien scientists. Human adaptability serving as an asset to the entire galaxy, rather than a threat. But if you choose to welcome us, the narrator continued, you gain something valuable. You gain a species that thrives on challenge, a species that sees impossible problems as interesting puzzles, a species that will work tirelessly to help others because we know what it means to struggle for survival. The video showed more examples of human aid missions. Crisis response teams that had volunteered for dangerous rescue operations when other species' advanced sensors and automation failed in chaotic environments. Human negotiators who had helped resolve disputes between alien species by offering fresh perspectives unburdened by thousands of years of historical grievances. We are young and we are imperfect, the narrator said, but we are also eager to prove ourselves. We are determined to earn our place among you. We are capable of becoming your greatest allies or your most persistent problem. The choice you make today will determine which future becomes reality. The video ended with a final image. Earth floating in space, small and fragile, surrounded by the vastness of a galaxy filled with ancient civilizations. But somehow, despite its size, the planet seemed significant. Humanity's homeworld, the source of a species that had survived countless challenges and learned to adapt to anything. The lights in the chamber came up slowly. 800 species sat in silence, staring at the now empty holographic display space. The evidence they had just witnessed had completely changed the nature of the debate. This was no longer about whether to restrict primitive beings for everyone's safety. This was about whether to integrate a rapidly advancing species that would spread through the galaxy eventually, regardless of what restrictions were imposed. The only question was whether that spread would happen as allies or as determined escapees, focused on breaking free at any cost. Executor Zin's eyes pulsed with intense light as he processed what he had seen. Around him, delegates were communicating frantically through private channels, reassessing their positions, calculating the implications. Sarah remained in the shadows at the edge of the platform. Her part was done. She had shown them the truth about humanity, not sugar-coated or hidden, but presented clearly. Now the galaxy had to decide what to do with that knowledge. The real test was about to begin. The verdict Executor Zin remained motionless for what felt like an eternity. His 7 arms folded in a configuration that Sarah had learned meant deep contemplation among Crithians. Around the chamber, the assembled delegates had erupted into urgent discussions. Translation devices created a chaotic symphony of 800 languages overlapping, clicks and whistles and harmonics blending into white noise that filled the vast space. Sarah stood quietly at the edge of the platform, trying to read the reactions of species whose body language she barely understood. Some delegates appeared agitated, their forms flickering or changing colors rapidly. Others remained perfectly still in ways that might indicate shock or careful consideration. A few had already left their seats, gathering in small clusters to debate privately. Finally, Executor Zin raised his central arms high above his head. The gesture commanded immediate attention. The chamber fell silent within seconds. 800 species turning their focus back to the ancient Crithian, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The evidence presented has been unusual and thought-provoking, Executor Zin said, his voice carrying that same resonance that needed no technological enhancement. Before we proceed to vote on the restriction measure, this assembly will hear statements from any delegate who wishes to speak. I remind everyone that our decision today will establish precedent for how we handle similar situations with other emerging species in the future. Councillor Vrex was first to stand, his crystalline form chiming louder than before. I must confess that what I have witnessed today has shaken some of my assumptions about humanity. Their adaptation capability is remarkable. Their problem-solving approach is genuinely valuable. However, this also makes them more dangerous, not less. A primitive species with simple technology is easy to contain if necessary. But a species that advances this rapidly, that reverse engineers our most sophisticated technology in mere years rather than millennia? This is deeply concerning. Murmurs of agreement rippled through sections of the assembly. Vrex continued, his multiple facets reflecting light and patterns that suggested genuine worry. If we restrict them now, yes, they will focus on escape. But if we grant them freedom, they will advance even faster with full access to our collective knowledge. Within a century, perhaps less, they could rival our own technological achievements. Within 2 centuries, they might surpass us. Are we prepared for that possibility? Ambassador Thel rose next, his form solidifying from its usual semi-liquid state into something more definite. Councillor Vrex raises valid concerns, but I wish to share something that the video did not mention. 5 years ago, when my people's colony world suffered that plague, I was there. I witnessed the human medical team arrive. The Zorvathian paused, and Sarah noticed what might have been emotion in his voice. They were terrified. Their equipment was inadequate. They knew they might fail. But they tried anyway because people were dying and they could not stand by and do nothing. One of their doctors, a woman named Dr. Martinez, worked for 73 hours without sleep, testing treatments on herself first before administering them to my people. She risked her own life repeatedly to ensure safety. Thel's form rippled with colors Sarah couldn't name. That is what I remember about humans. Not their technology or their adaptation speed, but their willingness to help even when helping was dangerous, even when they gained nothing from it. My daughter was saved by Dr. Martinez. I cannot vote to cage the species that gave me back my child. Silence followed this statement. Sarah felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. She hadn't known that Ambassador Thel had been personally affected by the Valorian crisis. More delegates stood to speak. Some expressed fear of humanity's rapid advancement. Others pointed out that many elder species had been violent and destructive in their youth, but had matured over time. A delegate from the Harmonious Collective noted that humanity's mistakes had mostly harmed only themselves, while many older species had inflicted suffering on others during their developmental periods. A voice emerged from the upper tiers. Belonging to a species Sarah had never encountered before, they appeared as a cloud of luminous particles held together by some invisible force. I am Observer Kesh of the Transcendent Assembly. My people have existed for 2 million cycles. We have watched countless species rise and fall. We have seen the patterns that lead to greatness and the patterns that lead to extinction. The cloud of particles swirled in complex patterns. Humanity displays something we have rarely observed. They possess what we call the persistence paradox. They survive things that should destroy them, then use those survival experiences to help others survive similar challenges. This creates a positive feedback loop. Each crisis they endure makes them more capable of handling the next crisis, and more willing to assist others facing similar challenges. Observer Kesh's particles brightened. In 2 million cycles, we have seen perhaps 12 species display this trait so prominently. Of those 12, 11 became cornerstones of galactic civilization, species that others turned to in times of greatest need. The 12th was destroyed by elder species who feared their rapid advancement. That destruction created a gap in our civilization that has never been filled. We lost problem solvers who could have prevented disasters that killed billions. The weight of those words settled over the chamber like a physical presence. 2 million years of perspective carried authority that even the most skeptical delegates couldn't easily dismiss. Executor Zinn spoke again. Observer Kesh's testimony is noted. Are there other statements before we vote? A delegate Sarah recognized as War Master Kryn of the Sentinel Dominion rose from his seat. The Sentinels were one of the galaxy's primary peacekeeping forces, responsible for responding to conflicts and threats across hundreds of sectors. Kryn's species looked vaguely reptilian, with scaled skin that shifted between green and bronze. I wish to address the security concerns directly, Kryn said, his voice carrying military precision. Yes, humans are advancing rapidly. Yes, they could potentially become a military threat, but consider the alternative scenario. If we restrict them, we create an enemy that will spend generations studying us, learning our weaknesses, developing countermeasures to our superior technology. An enemy that will eventually break free with centuries of resentment fueling their actions. Kryn's scales darkened to a deep bronze. From a pure security standpoint, it is far better to integrate them now, while they still see us as potential partners rather than jailers. Better to have their adaptation capability working with us than against us. Better to channel their determination toward mutual goals than toward escape and revenge. More discussion followed, but Sarah could sense the momentum shifting. The initial mockery and dismissal had transformed into serious debate about humanity's potential role in galactic civilization. Not everyone was convinced, but the conversation had fundamentally changed. Finally, Executor Zinn called for order once more. I believe we have heard sufficient perspectives. Before we vote, I will share my own judgment on this matter. The ancient Crithian stood fully, all 7 arms spreading wide in a gesture of formal declaration. I have lived for 6,000 cycles. I have presided over this assembly for 2,000 of those cycles. In that time I have seen fear lead to wisdom, and I have seen fear lead to catastrophic mistakes. His glowing eyes swept across the entire chamber. The Crithian Empire was once young like humanity. We made terrible errors. We developed weapons that horrified our neighbors. We expanded aggressively into territories that others claimed. We were arrogant and dangerous. But the elder species of that era chose to guide us rather than cage us. They chose to take a risk on our potential rather than guarantee making us their enemy. Executor Zinn's voice grew stronger. That choice gave the galaxy the Crithian Empire as a partner rather than as a threat. That choice allowed my people to contribute our knowledge of stellar engineering and quantum physics to benefit all civilizations. That choice, made 6,000 cycles ago by beings brave enough to risk trust, created the foundation for much of what we have achieved together. He paused, letting his words resonate through the chamber. Humanity asks for the same chance we were given. Not special treatment, not unlimited freedom without oversight, just the opportunity to prove themselves worthy of the trust we place in them. I believe we should grant that opportunity. The chamber remained silent. Then Executor Zin made his formal declaration. We will now vote on the proposed restriction measure. Those in favor of restricting humanity to their sol system, indicate your position. Lights began appearing around the chamber, each representing a vote. Sarah tried not to count them, but she couldn't help herself. Maybe 70 lights, perhaps 80. Far fewer than she had feared when she first arrived, but still a significant number of species that wanted humanity contained. Those opposed to the restriction measure, Executor Zin continued. The chamber illuminated like a nebula birthing stars. Hundreds of lights appeared simultaneously, representing hundreds of species who had decided to give humanity a chance. The difference was overwhelming, undeniable. The measure had failed by a massive margin. Sarah felt her knees weaken slightly. She had known the video was powerful, but she hadn't dared hope for such a decisive result. Executor Zin's eyes pulsed with what might have been satisfaction. The restriction measure fails. Humanity's expansion rights are confirmed under standard protocols. Furthermore, I propose an additional measure for the Assembly's consideration. Any member species wishing to impose sanctions or restrictions on humanity must first present their case to this full Assembly and receive majority approval. Comments for next.